We got the taxonomic category, annelids, and this project was completed by myself, Garrett Tingley,
and Jessica Parrish.
Starting off with the distinct characteristics that make annelids into their own category. They're mostly aquatic, with some of them being terrestrial, and we will get into that later. They're elongated bodies, which separates them from other worms because their bodies are typically, as it's stated, longer. Their bilateral symmetry means that their body shapes are mirror images along the midline called the sagittal plane. And then also within a distinct characteristic of the annelids is their movable bristles called septae. As you can see, the picture on the right is an aquatic worm, that is the polycata, and that those, as I said, aquatic, they mostly appear in water.
Okay, and the annelids characteristics continued are true column, which is the body cavity, well-developed mesoderm. A mesoderm is one of the 3 primary germ layers in the early embryo, and a segmented worm, which you can see on the right side. They have a body covering, digestive tract, a column, and a tissue layer lining the column.
Going into the subgroups. So we're starting with the marine worms. As I said earlier, most of them are marine worms. They're called polycata. And on the right, you can see the picture of there's a couple different variations of worms in that picture, but they're all polycata. And then the other group is a terrestrial worms, and they're called the oligocata. And those are earthworms. So like on a daily basis, you dig up in this dirt. Those are the typical worms you're going to find. Then you have leeches, which are very different from the other two because they're parasites, and those are mostly found in ponds.
Okay, and then the polycata is marine worms, which comprise of bristleworms. Their body segment has a pair of fleshy protrusions called parapodia, and parapodia bears many bristles.
Then we're moving on to the oligocata, which are the earthworms I talked about earlier. They have those simple septae, which are the bristles, as I mentioned earlier, on the segment of their body. They have a small head, and then their heads have no appendages sticking out of their heads. And as you see the picture on the right, this is the earthworm. So this is what you'd find when you're playing in the dirt, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay, and then we have leeches, which is a segmented parasite. The subclass is Hierodina, and they are hermaphrodites and have clitellum. Leeches, unlike the other groups, are parasites, meaning they feed off of other living organisms, and hermaphrodites are just like terrestrial worms.
Moving on to the evolutionary history. With these annelids, they share a common ancestor of protozoans and deuteromosomes. They undergo spiral cleavage, which is the division of cells, and there's 2 division of cells. There's a radial cleavage, and then there's a spiral cleavage. So, and then going on to the third cleavage, this is where the vertical plane of the third cleavage is resulting in the formation of a curved plate of 8 cells arranged in 2 rows of 4 each. And on the picture on the right, you can see that in radial cleavage, cell division has occurred so that cells are aligned directly over each other. And in spiral cleavage, cell division has occurred so that the cells are not aligned directly over each other, but rather aligned at an angle. That is the difference.
Okay, and then with the topic of interest, annelids can reproduce asexually or sexually. It varies depending on class. fission is how they reproduce asexually, which is the back end falls off, and the back end falls off to the body to form a new annelid.
And then these are our sources where we found our research. Thank you very much.